Before I begin, I'd like to inform each one of you that this webinar is going to be recorded. So for anyone who misses anything, either now or during the process of the presentation, we shall share with you after. All right. So just give me a minute. I'd like to start sharing my screen, then we can make the presentation. My name is Ruth Waruhiu. I'm a TBM marketing staff here at TBM. And today we'll be doing our workshop in regards to securing our digital footprint in a borderless security world. During this workshop, I hope you're going to learn a few things and even more than you expected in terms of data protection, data privacy, data security, cloud data, and encryption and cryptography of data. So to start off, I'd like you to consider this workshop as two things. This is a beam that talks about the data encryption, where one of the ICT guys says, the data encryption of my cloud provider uses is so good, even I can't access my data. So how secure is your data on the cloud if your system on your environment is working on the cloud? And then on the other hand, there's a budgeting aspect. When you're planning for a data budgeting for your ICT security environment, there's always a budget. Do you budget before a data breach or do you budget after a data breach? And that is how, as you can see in these two comparisons, where are you? So my question goes to all of you who are attending. Where are you in your security, privacy in your data? Our speakers today will be Eren Ramadhani. He's a digital trust sales leader from the Middle East and East Africa. He's located in South Africa, sorry. And our co-speaker, who's going to do run for us the demo, is Mukhtar Khan, a digital trust solution specialist for the Middle East and Africa region. My panelist here from TBM is Chea, our solution architect, Evan, our security team leader, Wilson, our security specialist with the SIM solution, and Alex, our security team lead on Guardium Solution. The agenda of this workshop will be just do a brief introduction that I've just done. Then we'll learn about our cybersecurity challenges, which are currently happening within the environment. What is the Kenyan Data Protection Act that was approved, last 2019? What is the IBM data protection capabilities as part of Zero Trust journey? What are the data protection use cases? And then we're going to do a demo where we're going to understand what is IBM Guardium to underpin your data protection program. So who is TBM? TBM is an ICT company with over 30 years of service provider experience. We're currently celebrating 30 years. Sorry. We support different kind of, we offer different kind of offers, support, client systems management, and ICT solution. Our solutions vary from ICT infrastructure, ICT security, ICT software and solution, and professional services. And our clientele run between Kenya in general, the whole region, and within East Africa, to different businesses such as enterprise businesses, SMEs, financial sector, public, private sector, telecommunication, government, NGOs, and across other industries. And our motto is enabling business through technology. So thank you for joining this workshop. I'll hand it over to Eren, who's going to take us through the next step on data protection. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth, for the introduction. Jambo to the Kenyan colleagues. It's good to be here on this Friday to spend some time with you guys, as Ruth mentioned. Yeah, so I think before we get into it, Ruth, I don't see my share button enabled. I'm not sure.
Currently working on it.
Okay, great. So maybe I think it's better for you to just drive the slides, if that's okay.
All right, no problem.
Okay. Okay, so yes, I think while we're starting, I think a very exciting time, to be in Africa. Lots of changes, lots of progress, and I think it speaks volumes. If we just look at progress made across the African continent, from Nigeria, Ghana, Rwanda, Kenya, South Africa, Zambia this week or last week, in terms of free and fair elections. So I think this really bodes well. This really bodes well for where the continent's headed. And yeah, I think just a bit about myself. My name is Eren. I've been based in South Africa, well, born in South Africa, and I've just started a role called Digital Trust Sales Leader for Middle East and Africa at IBM. But before that, I've been sort of at IBM for 6 years in various technical roles, from expert lab services right down to technical sort of pre-sales and now onto sales. So I do have a good grip, I believe, on our security capabilities.
Hi, this is Ryan Schwartz, Product Marketing Manager for IBM Security Guardium Insights.
Okay.
Forward-leaning companies who will lead in the
Not
next
sure
era
where this
are
going.
embracing.
Okay. Don't know where that came from. Sorry. So yes, my experience in security is now an adult. I've been in cybersecurity for 21 years across various banks, and in the last, I would say, 12 years working at vendors such as IBM. So very exciting time in terms of progress. Some of the notable things, just looking at the news in Kenya, seeing that you guys have passed some new sort of laws allowing users to buy shares on your stock exchange using bongo points from Safaricom. I think that's quite a big sort of move. Looking at Kenyan Airways and the partnership. I think also in August, as part of the unit called Fahari Aviation, where you guys are doing air taxis. So I think this lends itself very well to speak to where Kenya's headed, and obviously as the world knows, you are Silicon Sahara, so very, very, very good and exciting times, I think, to be Kenyan. I mean, another proud fact that I just want to maybe touch on in terms of Kenya is when I first started at IBM, we had with IBM having a host of security solutions, we had a resource based out of Kenya in Nairobi that used to fly into the Middle East and worldwide to execute on these projects, our security projects. And as part of me changing roles a few years ago, we thought instead of this guy from Kenya spending lots of time in Middle East, rather let's use him for lots of projects in Africa. So he's such an impressive, skilled resource that we moved him into South Africa to run our expert lab services for the whole of Africa. So that's Mr. Kevin Mutuma Kimati. He's not here today with us. He couldn't make today, but I think it speaks to the mindset of Kenyans. It speaks to the innovation. It speaks to the skills, the motivation, which is all very good, right? So I think, with going even as far back as M-Pesa, it shows that innovation is big on the Kenyan agenda. Now, I think with that obviously comes challenges as organizations in countries adopt technology. Some of the challenges when it comes to security would mean that threats out there from a global perspective would see these very innovative countries as threats. Not just threats in the sense, political or sort of wartime military threats, but threats to other economies. And generally when that happens, you become a target for your intellectual property, for citizen data, and so on. So Kenya, like many countries, the organizations are really facing major challenges in terms of, how do you defend against these threats? There's just way too much to do. Many vendors where, organizations have made investments into security tooling. And with that, it's good to invest in the capabilities, but you find there's much and increasing levels of complexity, which also becomes challenging to contend with. with that, there becomes too many alerts in security operation centers where, there's just a whole lot of alerts on the screen, and the analyst, at times gets a sense of apathy where it's just too overwhelming. So that also exacerbates this problem. Next slide, Ruth, please. Okay, so I think with some of these challenges, we know, to my earlier points about innovation, and with innovation, it's data hungry. There's lots of data points, telemetry when it comes to new technologies and platforms. So data sprawl is also creating quite a big challenge where, data is growing at an exponential rate, and this makes it even more challenging to try and protect, analyze, secure this data. With that comes things like regulatory requirements, legislative requirements, where, based on the breaches and the losses, which obviously affects things like, share prices, it affects whole countries, macroeconomic situations. The strictness of these regulations are there to ensure that data security, cybersecurity is taken really seriously. So I think that also sort of helps, to Ruth's point earlier, when it comes to budgets. In the past, security was just seen as, something that no one really wants to invest in. But I think because of things like regulations, there seems to be an increased focus on it. But more importantly, I think security of today also helps from a visibility perspective. Other than protecting the enterprise, it really, helps give you insights into your business operations, whether it's running efficiently, whether costs are being managed correctly. So it's not really about the antivirus threats that we once perceived security to be. Next slide, Ruth. Okay, so I think, aligned to this, when it comes to cybersecurity threats, many years ago, there were various types of threats. Now, when it comes to attacks, there's always two kinds of attacks: active attacks and passive attacks. The passive attacks is really where data and information is being stolen under your nose, but while the systems are still up and running. So you never know that your data or intellectual property has been copied and taken away from you. Okay, so that's been sort of one type of attack in the past. Then you had types of attacks which are more prominent today, types of denial of service attacks, which is really where ransomware has become quite prolific in the last couple of years, with huge impacts, both to, impacts to business as usual operations, but, it has the tendency to bring organizations right down to its knees. Next slide, Ruth. And I think with the likes of COVID-19, being something that all organizations had to contend with, many organizations during lockdown had to try and create sort of alternatives to business operations by leaning on, digital technologies. So that's in many ways increased the attack surface area, because these types of technologies had to be rushed in as quick as possible. And I think, with some of the regulations like your Data Protection Act, I think this aims really, other than all of the clauses and the verbiage, there's definitely implications if one does not adhere to these type of acts, both by the data controller, which is guarded or charged, to protect our information, but also if they sort of subcontract other providers, which we call the data processor. So there's definitely a stick being waved around, and I think Kenya has taken the right steps to align to the likes of GDPR and other regulations worldwide to try and get this to be taken seriously. Next slide, Ruth. Thank you. Okay, so looking at the theme of today's workshop, it's all around a borderless environment because of work from home, because of the new normal. And with that, the analysts like Gartner and Forrester and a whole lot of other independent analysts have coined the term zero trust. And zero trust really, aims to, as a philosophy, try to do two things. It says, verify everything and trust nobody, or rather the other way around. Trust nobody, verify everything. So with the porous network where we're allowing people to come in, be it customers, be it partners, be it employees, business to business relationships, the network perimeter is now quite, porous. And some of the controls that the zero trust philosophy aims to speak to is how do you reduce the insider threat, which is your own employees, but traditionally have worked like in a data center to do a change control. Now they're coming across a VPN from home, trying to do large scale, changes to environments. So we need to bolster up cybersecurity for the insider threat scenario. The remote workforce, how do you make sure identity and access management is taken care of? How do you make sure that data protection is taken care of? So I think IBM, is fairly fortunate in the likes that we've got several controls that can help in this sort of zero trust world that we're living in. And I think just to also say that looking at lots of the attacks in the past, in the recent past, from an IBM perspective in South Africa, let me talk just about South Africa because I live here. There hasn't been really customers using IBM technology that has been faced with these ransomware type of attacks. So we really take it, very seriously from the program level itself, right down to technology. Because we all know, the people process technology is fundamental here. Next slide. Okay, so I think when it comes to protecting against the likes of ransomware, allowing you to achieve and provide assurances to your boards around regulations, there's been confusion and, like I said on my earlier point, based on the proliferation of different types of technologies, antivirus, firewalls, sort of WAFs, it's just too much to contend with, right? And I think lots of companies and organizations tend to think that, if I've got firewalls or if I've got a WAF, I don't need any data activity monitoring. So I'd like to sort of dispel that myth to say that, we need to look at defense in depth. And, data activity monitoring could be seen more as a database firewall. It doesn't replace or negate the needs for controls at different layers of this OSI applications, OSI stack, from application to network to transport. But I think activity monitoring, very crucial. And I think to be able to prevent ransomware type attacks, you have to monitor your data at the source itself. Your application level controls, web server controls, application server controls, still very valid, but it's not the silver bullet. So I think I just wanted to draw the difference here between what data activity monitoring is versus what it's not. It's definitely not a SIEM technology, although it has to integrate with one. It's not a privileged access management solution, but again, we would sort of feed and integrate into a PAM solution, nor is it a DLP solution. So I think throughout the course of the rest of the couple of minutes I have, we'll just talk about capabilities that speak to what actually is, data activity monitoring, what is data protection. Next slide. Okay, so our IBM strategy and sort of solution set when it comes to solving this problem is by way of a technology capability called Guardium. And Guardium really aims to provide several capabilities, 5 of them mentioned here, in terms of discovering your data, analyzing it. Once you have a better handle of that, how do you protect it? Protection means let's take heavier handed enforcement controls, be it blocking, encryption, and so on. And then ultimately on the premise of it's just a matter of time till you get breached, not about if you're going to get breached, it's when. When that unfortunate sort of circumstance arises, how do you respond to it? So that's very important. And Guardium really caters for all of these scenarios, but ultimately in a way that actually simplifies these sort of control measures. It's not very, how can I say, impactful to business operations itself. And we've seen this, from testimonies from our clients. Next slide. Okay, so before I hand over to Mukhtar, I think what I really want to cover here is the use cases for something like Guardium. And, we realize that there's several competing products in the space. But again, from a Guardium perspective, we seem to be very successful in sort of achieving these sort of data security and data protection objectives for our customers, more so because IBM security, is not point solutions. We're playing across the life cycle from identity and access right down to the data side. So I'm going to cover 3 quick use cases here. I won't go through it in a high level of detail, seeing that we will share some of the slides with you. But generally the first thing is the data threat response. How do we get a handle of this? And our sort of philosophy, again, is to start with monitoring, so you know who's accessing what. Now, let's ask ourselves, who is the who? The who, in this case, would be your privileged users, the likes of database administrators. Generally, they are responsible for making sure databases are serving data, both for read access and for write or update access to applications. But you would find that most of the attacks have been a result of compromising these database administrators' credentials, because they've got obviously sensitive rights across the databases. So we start with sort of monitoring, discovery, classification, and then ultimately to sort of mitigate these threats, we take heavier-handed approaches in the latter part of the program, like encryption and blocking. So why is blocking important? We believe this is very critical because once you have a handle on which data sets are important, you'd be able to say to your board that, what, if any sets of users tries to perform any untoward actions like reading a large set of data or even encrypting a large set of data like ransomware would, Guardium can block it outright. And I think this is why we see lots of success when it comes to the approach we take. Next slide. Okay, so ultimately, again, when it comes to regulatory compliance, security controls is not something that everyone wants to go and invest in. It's like buying insurance. But I think Guardium is really flexible in the sense that it comes out of the box with policies that are already built for things like GDPR, which can be used for the likes of your Data Protection Act, SOX, PCI DSS, if you're a financial institution housing credit card information. So I think this is really key because this allows you to not get into analysis paralysis on how do you go out there and convince the business to comply. We can hit the ground running with accelerators that we have that ties directly to compliance policies, frameworks, and regulatory requirements. Okay, next slide. Okay, and then ultimately with everything that I've said, some of the innovation that we've just highlighted in Kenya itself, be it buying shares with bongo points, or if we look at some of the other air taxis as an example, this means this data is going to be tried to be abused, right? Flight paths, one can imagine, as an example. But I think the point here is, as a nation like yourselves become very innovative and take big and bold steps, cloud investments is going to become more sort of, the order of the day. And you're going to have to consider, because, you want to lower cost of ownership and really embrace the journey to the cloud, even if it's in Kenya itself, where the data never leaves Kenya. It's very important to make sure that the partner that you go with can provide the same level of control on your on-premise environment as you transition into the cloud. So Guardium out of the box, can really stream data from the likes of AWS's, Azure's, any of your SaaS investments that you make, infrastructure as a service investments. So we provide this uniform methodology, which is exactly, where you're going to be headed soon, I guess, in the next couple of years. But you'll also have this now to contend with, because with cloud adoption, there's a level of invisibility that you can't see. You can't see the data processor. You have to just trust. So this is something we also help with. Next slide. Okay, so I think, again, this 3 or 4 slides just talks to the data protection capabilities that we have. I think I've talked through in terms of, vulnerability assessment and the like. But I think, seeing that we did start a bit late and I had some technical challenges, I think I'd rather pause here because some of these screens Mukhtar is actually going to show you now in his demo. So I think with that said, Ruth, I think I'd rather stop here and then hand it over to Mukhtar.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Eren. Good afternoon or good day, everyone. I hope that you are all well. I'm quickly going to share my screen. Ruth, maybe you can pass over privileges for me to do so.
Yes, I will do so. And as we begin the demo presentation, I'd like to guide the listeners on a few things about to navigate the system. First thing on your screen, if you're using a phone or using a laptop or a desktop, please note on your right side, there's some icons that either gives you a zoom in or a zoom out magnifying glass or a full screen expansion. Do you have the right now, Mukhtar?
I do have so. Thanks.
All right, thank you. All right, we're now proceeding to the demo.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Just wanted to take some time to introduce myself. My name is Mukhtar Khan. I work for IBM. I'm based in Johannesburg, and I am a data protection specialist at IBM. I've been working at IBM for the last 7 years. I have a background in many fields: analytics, asset management, business-to-business integration, and 2 years ago, I joined the IBM security team and have been working with Guardium since. I like Ruth mentioned, I am going to go slow through the demo, so you will have some time to zoom in and look at some of the content if you need to. Unfortunately, it cannot get a lot bigger than this year. So I ask you to please use the functionality if needed, but also if there are any questions or queries, please use the Q&A function. We can discuss any questions after the demo. Okay, so firstly, this is the landing page of the Guardium solution. And when dealing with Guardium data protection, we normally deal with a lot of different teams, privacy teams, security teams, compliance teams, and there's no central place for everyone to have access to the right data. So with Guardium, you will have access to all of this functionality for different roles. So there's role-based access. So whoever needs access to the correct data, they will be able to do so, but also the right reports can be shared with the right individuals as well. When logging in, you will see that we follow a similar type flow that what Eren has mentioned: the discover, monitor, assess, protect, and act. And I will guide you through the demo today through those steps as well. We also have within the solution a link which will take you to the best practices of our solution. So if you wanted to implement maybe a specific policy, you would be able to do so by going to our IBM Knowledge Center and accessing all of the best practices there. The first thing I think in any data protection project is to understand your data, right? So we understand that we would know where certain types of information is in our environment, and we can onboard those environments into our Guardium solution. And when we onboard those databases, we will be able to see some descriptions of that environment. So we can see that we have some Oracle environments, we have some DB2, we have some SQL that are onboarded here. We can see the IP addresses of those databases, and then we can see if that data source has been onboarded into Guardium and configured for any of the compliance rules that we have within the solution. So on the top, you will see that we have four. This gives you an overview of where you are in terms of compliance. It will tell you that you have 4 databases within your network. 2 of those databases are configured for compliance, 2 of them for CCPA, 1 for GDPR. Now, I want to stop here because you might be thinking, okay, there's nothing for me as Kenya, But no, all of these compliance wizards are completely customizable, right? So we give you a baseline that you can use to start your data protection journey and compliance journey with something like the Kenya Data Protection Act. And you can implement this using GDPR, for example, and make the changes that are very specific to the data that you have within the country. So maybe Kenya ID number is a little bit different to the South African ID number. So you would want to implement that in a different way or try and find that information in a different way in Guardium. You can do so. I can also look at any applications which are linked to those databases. So if there's any application running in front of the database, I can group my databases to a certain application so I understand where the data is coming from which application. I can also see that I've configured some of these compliance, and it's a wizard that you can run through within the solution. You onboard the database, you say, set up the compliance monitoring, and it will take you through the different steps. Now, within the compliance, we can also see what are we doing. So it will give you a summary of what you are monitoring with that compliance wizard. So you would look at, okay, the number of databases that are using, how many policies are we using, how many reports are generated. You'll notice that I can see there's different groups which are monitoring within this GDPR compliance wizard, right? So I'm looking at the DMLs, I'm looking at how many select commands are being run. I'm looking at only personnel that are related to GDPR. So there's admin users that I have within my network. So I've marked those as GDPR admin users. I'm looking at all grants commands, revoke commands, etc., to see if anyone is granting anyone permission. I can see the policies that are implemented within this regulation as well. So I'm monitoring for failed logins to a certain database. I'm monitoring for revoke commands, grant commands, DML, DDL, etc. Right? So very specific. These are a lot of the details, but we are able to also customize the policies that we will implement as well. Okay. We also have access to reports. So you'll have access to a number of reports within the solution, and we'll touch on that a little bit later. Okay. Now that we understand our data, right, we want to also see, okay, we know some of the databases that are in the environment, but we want to be able to discover and classify if there's any additional databases that are in our network. Perhaps there was a team that needed to bring up a data source and they copied over some data from another database. So what I want to actually do is I want to scan my environment, right? And I want to discover any databases on a daily basis, on a monthly basis, on an ad hoc basis. So I can run it every day if I want, at demand if I want as well. And during that scan, I want to also say, okay, whatever data I find, I want to look for data which is very sensitive, right? And that's where we now need to discuss, okay, what are we going to deem as sensitive data, right? And there'll be already a lot of predefined stuff within Guardium. Like Eren mentioned, we have accelerators, we have pre-built scenarios, policies, etc., that you can use within the solution. But if something is not there, we can also build it in. So we can use regular expression to find any data patterns which are in your environment. So for instance, we can add whatever data we want. So ID numbers, credit card numbers, visa numbers, email addresses, phone numbers, whatever it may be, whatever we deem as sensitive to our company, we can add that in, and the solution will go and find if the databases in the network have any of that information for us, right? It will then display all the matches that were found within the environment, and we can take that data and put it in dashboards so that we are quickly able to see it, right? So I'm going to show you how we can display the data a few ways. So this is a dashboard which we've created for some users, and they can see, okay, how many databases were discovered? Okay, what's the type of those databases? And then we can also see that there's a lot of unknown databases, right? So we might have found those databases that have open ports, but we're not sure exactly what those databases are, but we'll give you all the information, the IP address, etc. And then we can go and look at what that data source is, right? We can also understand what is in the data. So the classification of the data, like I mentioned earlier, we will look for sensitive objects, but if there's certain data which we find that is not maybe in sensitive objects but should be, we can highlight that here in classified personal information not protected in the policy sensitive group, right? So I can see that I'm not protecting phone numbers, email addresses, but also salary. Salary is something very concerning that we're not protecting. You know, nobody should be able to access or view that information without any permissions. So we possibly want to add that to the sensitive groups and put a policy in place to protect that data. I can also see how much counts of my different data. So this is kind of a landscape which shows you all of the data within your organization. So now that we spoke a little bit about the data and understanding the data, we need to put that policies in place, the rules that will really protect the data or protect the access to the information. Remember, we want to try and make sure that the right people are accessing the right data at the right time for the right purpose. So we're going to go in and see all of the policies that are available within the solution, right? So this is where you would access all your rules or policies. Now you can see you can have multiple policies. So for different databases, you might have different rules. For different environments, you might have different rules as well. So we want to implement these policies. And what we can see is we can see, okay, how many rules are in each of what we call a policy. We can also see when it was installed and if it's working, right? We can uninstall those policies if we're not happy with them, refine them and reinstall them again as well. You'll see that there's a lot of ones that are not installed, but these are the accelerators that you get with Guardium, right? So you're not starting from scratch. You are from day one able to start with at least a basic data security policy. And we recommend all our customers to start there and then see what works for you, understand what you're monitoring, and then refine as you go along, right? Data security is a journey. It's not something that happens overnight. There's no silver bullet. We work on it. We go through this iterative process where we discover, classify, monitor, protect, act, and then we start all over again. Now, just so that we can see what are the violations against some of the policies, we can also see, okay, who has broken those rules that we've put into place, right? So we can see how many times they've been broken, how many SQLs were processed during the time. So all of that details are available in the solution. You can have a look at that. You can see, okay, we've had a lot of violations on a risk indicative error messages. So someone's running something, it's giving them an error. We have a lot of policies there. We also have a lot of SQL errors, which are triggering alerts as well, right? So we can investigate that further based on this as well, right? We can also analyze the policies. So for instance, I put a policy in place. I don't know if it's going to work, but I want to try it. So I put it in place and I have 50,000 hits in the next 5 minutes, right? That means the policy is, something's wrong with the policy because we shouldn't be having so many violations against the rules, right? So we can go back and refine that policy. If something is being triggered maybe once or twice, but it's slowly going down, that means the policy is effective. It's changing the behavior of the privileged users within our environments. And that's what we want to achieve. We want the privileged users to really understand what their role is and what they should be accessing and not access data which they're not supposed to, right? So this allows you to also understand if your rules are working within the organization. We can export any of the information from Guardium. So if you want a list of all your policies, you can download them. You can download reports, etc., via to CSV, PDF, whatever it may be. Those are all possible as well. So our rules are in place. We understand the data. We want to now actually look deeper down into the database itself, right? So now we want to see, okay, do I have any vulnerabilities on the database itself? You know, is there any outdated patches? Is there any misconfigurations that are not that are done within the database environment? And that's when we go to a module in Guardium called Guardium Vulnerability Assessment. Now, the assessment is available for a number of databases, right? From Cloudera to Oracle to Sybase, Teradata, whatever it may be, we have those tests, and we can really say, okay, what I want to test on and which environment, right? So we will go through onboarding that database, select the tests we want to run, and then what we can do is we run the assessment. And when we're done running that assessment, we are given a report that looks like this, right? And what the report really gives us is a score to tell us how secure or how hardened that data source is, right? It's not a normal vulnerability assessment tool like others in the market. This is specific to your data sources. So we're looking specifically at the Oracle database here, and we can see that we've passed 23% of the tests, which means that this database needs a bit of work. There's a lot of things I can do to improve it. So in the case of a data breach, for example, I know that my environment doesn't have any loopholes which the hackers can exploit, right? And we take all of these tests from a few different global standards industries. So like the CIS, Center for Internet Security, STIG, Security Technical Implementation Guideline Standards. We take that in. We take the common vulnerabilities and exposures tests as well and import them into this these tests that we run against the database. So we as IBM are not developing these. These are developed by global companies that really specialize in these security standards, right? So that's around the tests. And then what you'll see is that I also have this table here that says critical, major, minor, caution, right? And what I want to do is I want to look at how many tests I have. So that's a summary of what I'm seeing. But also at the bottom, it really lists all these findings in that critical order. So the test that comes on the top is the most important and you should address it, right? But if you don't, so say you've addressed a lot of these and you now feel that, you know, the tests that are coming up, I've done it on purpose, I want to remove it from the test, right? Because every environment will have some exceptions, right? So what I'll do is I can add an exception to say, for this time period, excuse this test from all my reports so that I don't affect the score and I don't affect the tracking of sorting out the hardening of my database as well. So you can do that. You can also create tickets into ServiceNow or any of your ticketing systems where you can say, okay, we found this vulnerability. We think that we should assess it. You can send the ticket to the ticketing system, and then it will get assigned to a project or to an individual to address. Okay, so that's the vulnerability assessment. If there's any questions, like I said, please pop them in the chat. We will talk about those. I want to talk about now that we've implemented the discovery, classification, protection, assessing our vulnerabilities, we want to now understand what is happening in our environment, right? So what I can do is I can look at a full SQL activity report, which really shows me all the data around what is happening on the environments that I'm monitoring, right? And as you can see, there's a lot of detail here, right? From the timestamp, username, IP addresses used, the database name that was accessed, the source program that was used to access the environment, and also the SQL statement that was run, right? And then I can also see how many records were affected by that SQL as well. So I can see that someone was trying to access the transaction table here, and one record was affected, right? And they ran an insert. So we can detail as you open, but the full detail is available as well. I can also look at how many policy violations are triggered. So this will tell me, okay, how many people are triggering those rules, how many people are breaking those rules, right? And this is an indicator that something may be wrong and maybe you want to investigate it, and you can do so, right? I can also look at how my, I can also look at how my policies are working, right? So I can see, okay, by the number of databases, how many policy or rules were executed, how many were violated, etc. And it gives you all the information. Like I said, these are completely customizable based on the different roles. The security people might be interested in this dashboard, but someone else might be interested in a compliance dashboard, and you can give them access to one or all of these dashboards as well, right? So those are reports that you can use within Guardium. But I think when it comes to data security, a lot of companies feel that, we're monitoring all this information, but, sometimes we might miss things, or we might not be able to pick things up with the normal eye, right? So if someone goes into an environment every week and downloads 2 or 3 records, but he does that every week and is accessing very sensitive information, we wouldn't really take note of that, right? So what we would use is analytics to help us uncover these hidden threats within our environment, right? And understand the risk posture of our users. So in Guardium, we have an analytics module, and this comes with your base Guardium. It really takes us through, okay, what is the user risk? So who are my most risky database administrators, privileged users within the environment, right? And what it does is it will list them by their risk profile and what they're doing in your environment. So these can change on a weekly basis, monthly basis, but you have the ability to also take them, lower their risk, higher their risk, depending on what you know as a administrator of Guardium. So I can see for Polly is in our environment. She's really been a risky user, and I can see here that I can really see here that she's triggered a lot of violations. She's really triggered our threat analytics modules as well. So there's some risky behavior there. She's accessed very sensitive information. She's really run a lot of administrative queries and a lot of volume of activity. So she's basically a risky user. I can see that Don also is quite risky. But Don, I know that he's been assigned to a new project. So probably he's getting familiar with the environment. He's accessing new information, whatever. So I can lower his risk. The more I interact with the model, the more accurate it will become, right? And then we have our active threat analytics, right? So active threat analytics will really sit in your environment and have these machine learning algorithms sitting in the background and understand the behavior. So today, someone like Eren might access 5 database records, right, on a sensitive object. But tomorrow he's accessing 1 million records and he's trying to copy the data out of a database. That is not normal behavior for Eren. And so the system will automatically flag that for you. You can then say, okay, well, is this normal behavior or should I investigate? And you can send that information to your SIEM solution. So I'm quickly going to go through some of the threat use cases that we have. So what we do is we have things that we can pick up behavior that is very similar to maybe an account takeover. So someone's taken over a privileged account. We'll be able to see a lot of differences in the user behavior. If there's a lot of data tampering, so people are changing or editing a lot of the data within the databases, that we can pick up as well. If someone is giving a lot of privileged access to users, we can pick that up. That's massive grants. But if someone is doing a denial of service attack, so they're running a query against the database that's looping and causing the database to go down, we'll be able to pick up that this is now triggering a lot of activity against the database, and we'll be able to pick that up, right? So the first one is a denial of service. And what I'll see here is I can see, okay, which is the user that triggered it, and I can see what's his normal activities per hour. I can see what his activities went to is over 1 million. And I can also see, okay, was he a risky user or not? Okay, that might work. But what's his distribution of hours? Is it during the week, during the weekend, after hours, what it is, and what is he running? Is he running only select commands, or is he running data manipulative language, right? So is he changing things? And from there, I can say, okay, well, you know what? This is very, this is very risky. Let me investigate further. And I can go through all the details, understanding, okay, what objects has he accessed, what the violations are, etc. Right? So I have the ability to investigate from Guardium. And when I know that I've done my investigation correctly, I can also send this information either to the SIEM solution via syslog, or to ServiceNow, where I can create a ticket, and when that incident is created, we can also access the information in that other solution as well. We have out-of-the-box integration with IBM QRadar, Splunk. We have integration with your PAM solutions such as CyberArk, Dichotic, and also with your identity and access management solutions. So the Guardium solution really allows you to have all your security audit data in a single environment. And we not only monitor databases, we are able to monitor big data environments, your semi-structured data in data warehouse and big data environments, but also unstructured data that might be sitting in SharePoint or in your file servers. So Linux, Unix, Windows file servers, we can bring that information in as well. We can also integrate into your cloud data sources, so we can bring that information into Guardium as well. Guys, that's all I have for my presentation. For my demo, I'd like to hand over back to the TBM team.
All right. Thank you so much, Mukhtar, for the demo. Thank you so much, Eren. Now we are proceeding to the question and answer session. So if you have any question, maybe you have a comment or you have an issue or some clarification you would like on the presentation, please share it on our chat so that we can respond back to your questions. And while at it, check on your chat. I've shared with you a polling link where you can share your feedback about our workshop experience, and also sharing your current security infrastructure, environment. Thank you. So share on your questions, please. You have an option to unmute your microphone on your end if you're comfortable to ask a question via voice, or if you're not, you can text it on the chat, just to clarify how you're going to ask your question. Thank you. So while you're while you're running the poll, or you're responding, asking a question or preparing a question, so what is the summary from this presentation? So on this presentation, as you can see, IBM Security Guardium is a modern data security, and for you to have that modern security environment within your infrastructure, you need to discover, analyze, protect, respond, and simplify your data processes. For those who are concerned about, we have maybe the other solutions within the system. As you can see at the bottom there's integration and orchestration of such solutions with SOA, SIEM, IAM, and ITOps. Considering if you have such solutions through the IBM product portfolio, or as Mukhtar said, it can also be they can also integrate it with the other SIM solution you might be having, the Splunk, the Psychotic, and etc. So share your questions, share your feedback on our poll link, and then we'll get back to you. Thank you. All right, thank you so much for joining us during this session. Thank you for your patience. First of all, I'd like to apologize for the delay. We were waiting for people to join in, and for those who join in, thank you so much for attending. And for those who might have missed something or are not clear or want to clarify anything, we shall share this webinar workshop after the recording. As I stated before, it's recorded. I shall share it after, and then you can go through it, and then you can share with us what are the next steps you like. Would you like to have a one-on-one, a site survey, a product solution conversation? So to contact us, you can email us on marketing. You can call us on our local number. If you'd like to understand more about our partners solution portfolio, you can visit our website. And if you'd like to attend more of our workshops, they'll be shared on our social, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and Instagram. So be sure to like, follow, and even respond back to anything that you like us to share with you in regards to our workshop and webinars. Again, thank you so much, Eren, for participating in giving us a presentation. Thank you for Mukhtar for our demo, and for the team, my panelist team. Thank you so much. All right, thank you so much, everyone.